Am I famous now?
You're on TV.
So before we dive into everyone's updates, I wanted to bring up, can I get people's thoughts on, did everyone see the thing from, I think because Frank's involved, this is from the Nerves team, but Bakeware?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I knew that was a possible implementation approach.
I mean, it doesn't
it's not
change anything. It's
not the same way competitive. It's
No, I'm not asking in competitive sense.
no, it's not even like a competitive thing. Like it's literally just the same thing that I did in Distillery, just cleaner.
Oh, so this is a release.
Yeah,
it's release packaging.
It's an approach that like a lot of Linux installers do, because like there's not MSI the way there is on Windows. So like a lot of installers on Linux, because like Bash and other scripting languages allow you to shove binary data at the end of a script, and you can read from yourself. Right. And their difference was they made a C program to do it because they didn't want to depend on Bash.
I guess my question comes down to, though, is how are they able to get their executables so small if they're essentially just packaging up the entire beam?
They're extracting it into memory.
They're saying the compressed size. They say that. They use a Z standard compression.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not the final size, it's the compressed size.
But I mean, I think the example apps I saw, they're packaging a fairly small application. Somebody on a comment somewhere mentioned that for a just bog standard Phoenix app, it was like 15 megabytes or something. And I imagine the bulk of that is probably Erlang. So, right. But that's 15 megabytes with compression. So there's not really any room left to make that smaller. That's like the minimum size, essentially.
Okay.
So this will be definitely a neat way of distributing standard Beam releases.
Yeah, it definitely makes that aspect nicer, because the executable releases feature in Distillery depends on Bash, and I haven't checked, but I'm pretty sure that never got ported into the core release functionality. So it's pretty much not used at this point by anyone.
But from our discussion, you also mentioned, when I asked about static linking, you would have to statically link the entire beam to basically get rid of some of the dynamic linkages that are
right. You still have all the dynamic dependencies, although that's
which
not
I guess
too different from a lot of different languages deploying executables, unless you're deliberately deploying a statically linked binary.
But if you're looking to do what Go does, for example, it's not quite there.
Right. Although Go binaries also dynamically link in some cases.
Okay.
Yeah. If anything, the static linking on Beam is annoying because everything becomes static. So you can't do some of your dependencies as dynamic, except for libc, because just how libc works. But you can't be like, oh, I'll use the SSL and everything. But the Beam itself will be static and everything else won't be. There's no flag to do that intermediate version of static linking.
Okay. But Lumen binaries can be both dynamically or statically linked. Is that?
Yeah, just like Go binaries or Rust binaries or C binaries, we can choose to statically or dynamically link objects.
As a linking stage, we're using the system linker, so it doesn't care anymore that it's Lumen at the link stage.
Cool.
The only thing really weird about it is that instead of our names being mangled, all the Erlang names are what you'd expect them to be. So there is literally a symbol called _Erlang : add/2. It is the Erlang name. That is our mangling scheme. That's the only thing weird about it.
Yeah, I mean, we could mangle to play nice with other tools, but we just haven't had any reason to do that yet. In the future, we may find that becomes necessary. But because our functions don't encode any type information or anything like that, at least right now, there's no sense in us mangling our names.
Yeah, if we start to do clever stuff with pre-knowing the types we might mangle, and that way
I think we're falling down a hole here.
yeah.
That's every single time.
Yeah.
Is
But this
that
one
hot?
time I caused it, so I want to short circuit it before we go deeper.
That's good. I just want I see a fellow gister. Is that Hans or is that just a random that joined?
It might be me.
Oh, okay, it's Hans. Okay, all right.
Yeah, okay.
Just as fellow gister.
Okay, I can see if I can set my name.
No, that's fine. I just didn't know if we had you here. All right, so the next thing I wanted to bring up was I've already discussed it with Luke and Paul and of course Hans, but due to some changes within Dockyard is going to be reducing their ability to invest R&D in Lumen over the near term, probably medium term. That unfortunately means that Hans is moving on and Luke will be assigned to billable work at the first opportunity that Dockyard has. And so I'd like to kind of scope the next few weeks out to see you don't need to get into it in the call, but I know that Dockyard has committed to you through the end of October. I don't know if your plans mean that that would be shorter than that, but are we kind of still expecting you to be full-time in Lumen through the end of October, or do you have something else coming up?
I can update you on that like as soon as I know more.
Okay. All right. In any event,
I mean, more likely yes than no.
Okay. So let's assume for now that that's the case. And as far as I know, Luke hasn't been assigned to any billable work, and you haven't been notified of any billable work, right?
No, not right now. One of them
Okay.
was if I was backup in case Tristan wanted to do some Ruby work, but
Right.
being okay with it. So I haven't heard anything new from Alex since then.
Okay. So then let's assume for the time being that we have essentially 6 weeks of time where Luke and Hans can commit nearly full time to Lumen. Let's discuss kind of like roadmap features and prioritize what we think is the most effective use of that time over the next 6 weeks. I know that there was some work on developer ergonomics that Luke has been working on, but it seemed like from last week that this would be trivial, not necessarily trivial, but small implementation. Some of the compile stuff from like the mix command to compile from Elixir to Lumen. Is there any other features that we feel like would be realistic for the team to accomplish over the next 6 weeks?
I'm planning to add, just because I don't want to have to keep remembering how to run them all by hand. I'm going to add a new workflow so that like we can ignore it being broken. That just checks out our fork of OTP and like runs a test script where each of the files is built individually, so that we just have a running like punch list of like which like gen server doesn't build because of X or init doesn't build because of Y, and that we can see the improvements and we don't have to all run them individually anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So like we expect this workflow to fail for the long term, but it gives us a goal list of like once that all builds, then we can be like, oh cool, we're done with OTP, or we can make the decision of like how we have to change our fork.
Okay.
I would tell Lumen to not, link executables for that. Just generate the object files. If it makes it that far, then, that's good enough.
How do I do that? Is it an
You
emit
can
file?
specify the emit.
Okay, so instead of emit all, I would just do emit up to.
Yeah, and I mean, I
object.
wouldn't use emit all at all in the test environment. You can just leave that flag off entirely. But if you just do emit object.
Well, I have emit all turned on in like the test runner for the integration tests in OTP, mostly because it's really useful doing it locally. I suppose I could turn it off on CI though, and it would save space.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, the compiler will spit out, all the details that matter when it hits a failure, like the operation that it bailed out on, which is a lot easier to dig through than the raw output. The raw output's more useful when something goes wrong at a weird stage. But even then, like having that generated for like every file in the OTP repo would be just a boatload of extra work that, would generally just get ignored.
So
99% of the time.
other stuff for right now, the Linux build of like what's called runtime full, but is actually just it does OTP, like liblumen OTP. So I probably should rename that. It runs for between 17 and 30 minutes, which is super long compared to anything else, and then has no log. Like the runner is busted for it for some reason. I don't know what's going on because GitHub Actions gives us no log. And
so it timed out or it crashes?
I don't know. Like it gives no log. Or it gives a log that's like not useful. Like it really does not give a running log while it is running, which is also a weird behavior of GitHub Actions. Usually it's, it's like all CIs. They give you the log as they're running.
Is this like a specific environment?
I do not know. All the other Linux ones are fine though. So I don't know if it's a memory or like disk space issue or what is going on. Because it uses the same container as everything else Linux. I guess I can see if we can get support on it. I'm not sure if we can.
I did see something the other day that
about it, so maybe we can check it.
But I think I saw something where somebody was able to open a shell into like a Docker container running on Actions. Somebody mentioned something like that. I don't know where I read that. It was very recently, sometime in the last week.
I mean, obviously you can
might be an option.
Tunnel to something, assuming they don't block it. But
yeah, I didn't dig into that at all because it's not important to me.
What log are they providing then?
It's like just like 4 lines. It's like the standard, like it's like runner setup, and then it's like some error about can't contact the runner or something. So that's why I'm thinking like it might be a space or memory issue.
Can you just like put it to IO along the way and see if it's?
It sounds to me like it's something
like,
happening on GitHub's end. Like we don't have any control over it.
Running. So like running in a Docker container locally, it works. So like the Docker container is not wrong. It is something about GitHub Actions, how they run our Docker container and our tests is different than how we can run it locally in Docker. Which usually when this happens on CI, it's like a space issue or a memory issue because none of the CIs handle those well.
I mean, this is specifically for Linux builds, right?
Right. And so the Mac one's fine, but maybe the Mac ones are more because the Mac ones are running on Mac Stadium, so they're running on real hardware, while the Linux ones are running on Docker container. Unlike the other CIs we used before, we can't tune the VMs that the Docker containers are running on top of. So maybe they're not beefy enough, but like I don't know why switching from prop tests, which uses like just so much CPU and memory, to integration tests, all of a sudden like they do not work. If anything, they should use fewer resources.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say without getting any sort of feedback from the workflow. There's not much we can do other than, I guess, ping GitHub about it.
Yeah, so for the team, I'm going to hit the forums, see if they can help. And other thing is, of course, if the only thing you're waiting on is the Linux runtime full build, just don't worry about it. Just merge.
No, I'm working on other issues that need to be resolved before that branch can be merged.
Obviously, how much time are you burning on trying to get GitHub Actions to work?
I mean, it hasn't been a whole lot.
It's supposed to be in the background.
Works pretty well.
Like when Paul asked me how long would I wait, 6 hours, it was, I looked at it, it didn't work. I'm like, oh, maybe like there's transit errors. So like I'll run it again, but I don't let GitHub Actions block me. I just have a push scratch file. And so I don't push up everything I have done because Mac Stadium, we only get like 5 machines. And so I don't want to run a build when they're all queued up and then have to rebase and run the test again. And so I don't let it block me anymore.
Okay.
It just means I can't push up all my code I have done as much.
Right.
But this is the test, so it's not as important. The test being converted mostly reveals edge cases for Paul and Hans to fix. Like that's the reason to switch over to integration tests is we're testing more cases of Erlang code then.
Something else I wanted to bring up. Sorry. Well, first thing is that Paul and I have a hard stop at 11. We're going to go on a call with Jose. If other people want to join, they're welcome to. I can put I can send the Hangout link. We're going to discuss the asks of the Elixir core team to help better support Lumen. Sorry, something just bothered me in my throat. The panel at Code, was it Code Beam, Code Mash, whatever it is, the thing that Hans was on last week that I was moderating. There was an interesting point brought up by Kirsten, Urjang developer, is that the pain that he felt in one of the biggest issues he had with developing Urjang was keeping up with OTP releases. And I wanted to bring, he actually, I think he put the question to Hans to ask him, and kind of, I guess, a bit of a warning or to start thinking about this. I wanted to put it to you guys. How do you guys feel about that? Like, do you guys feel like it's going to be constantly having to keep up with OTP? Is that something you've actually thought about? Do we have processes in place to mitigate the churn that goes along with OTP releases and Lumen keeping lockstep?
I mean, the main thing that matters in terms of OTP releases are major features. So if a new major feature is introduced that requires runtime support, then we need time to develop that feature in parallel to the OTP version.
Yeah, so like
aside from that though, no.
When persistent turn came out, that would be a big thing. So like it was mentioned when they mentioned the Beamjet, like in the same talks. Someone mentioned on Twitter or someone mentioned it on the Docker discussion or in the Lumen channel. But they also mentioned that the Erlang team is finally thinking about that bad arg are a pain in the ass and useless. And so they're going to change them. But they didn't say how. So if all of a sudden the BIFs stop bad arguing, that's going to affect us.
I don't see there's any way they could possibly make that change at this point.
Yeah, I don't get how they make a compatible change, but it's still a possibility.
Yeah, it would have to be something where like it logs better errors.
Yeah, it would have to be like what we were doing with anyhow, where like it doesn't change the return type, but if you don't catch it, you get a better error.
Yeah. Yeah, they can't even change the stack trace format.
Do you feel like you would wait until the OTP release and then say, okay, this is final, this is going in, or would you guys kind of keep on top of OT development and start implementing features as they're kind of?
I think we'd lag behind about 6 months would be my feeling, and that way, you know, we get a heads up in advance when they're starting work on a new feature. If we have the bandwidth, we can start working on it right away and try and remain at parity with OTP releases. But if not, giving ourselves a 6 month window to lag behind means that, you know, we have enough time to probably pick up pretty much any feature they're going to be introducing into the Beam at this stage of the game. But of course, there might be exceptions to that. And I mean, if we're looking down the road in the future, if Lumen as a project is successful enough to survive across multiple major OTP releases, by that point, we probably have more community involvement to the extent where we can probably rely on having a little bit more, you know, bandwidth to apply to these releases.
The last point in this vein is, do you think it would be a good idea to limit Lumen lockstep updates to major OTP releases only, or would you want to also tackle minor releases?
Well, if minor releases are simply like Erlang code changes, then there's no reason why we couldn't keep up with those. You know, if they release a major release that we haven't released yet, and then they start releasing minor releases, you know, we're going to be lagged behind there. But, you know, for minor releases that just result in like Erlang code files changed, we should be able to just recompile the standard library that we distribute with the compiler and release our own version of that minor release.
Really, the complication would be if we have to support multiple versions, because we're keeping our changes on, you know, we have OTP forked, but we're not going to modify their branches because it makes vendoring their changes harder. And so we're going to have a Lumen branch, but if we need to if we need to support multiple OTP versions at once, we're going to have to like have
We're
a Lumen
not.
version of every one of those release branches, and that
We're
our team
definitely
can't do
not
that
going to
now.
do that.
Like,
Yeah, I don't think we have the bandwidth
We're
to.
probably-
We don't have the bandwidth, and it makes zero sense for us to do that on a bleeding edge project anyways.
right. So likely what we'll do is we will either take newest OTP or we will take newest OTP where Elixir is using all the features. You know, because like Elixir usually holds off on depending on newest OTP for like a revision or two. Because
yeah, I would be more concerned with keeping up with Elixir than keeping up with Erlang, to be honest. Yeah. Because that gives us a little bit more of a, like they lag behind about that much. I'd say 6 months to a year.
Sounds like it would give you the 6 feet you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, because remember, they're just using the logger features now. Like that was the big thing for 11.
Yeah, I think if we shoot for that as a goal, you know, that covers a lot of the community that would be interested in it. You know, they'll be able to keep using the version of Elixir that they want, but we don't have to worry about needing to cover like the absolute newest of everything, which is not realistic.
All right. So the next 23 minutes, let's just go through stand-up items then. Hans?
Yeah, so I'm wrapping up and pushing up the changes to like constant evaluation stuff in the front end, which turned out to be a rabbit hole. And then I'm hoping to start work on types if that's not something, if there's not something else that comes up that's more urgent.
Lars, do you have anything this week you want to bring up?
Nothing in particular. If there are Elixir land things that need doing, Luke, it sounds like you're doing mixed, like approaching mixed tasks and stuff. You can check with me, and I might actually be able to squeeze in an hour or two here and there to do that sort of stuff. If it involves like an IR, I'm lost. But
no, it's mostly having a mixed test that just wraps the Lumen command line. You're free to take. Right now, I'm gonna focus on the OTP testing, because I guess I'm worried more about that we can run all of OTP before we try to bootstrap Elixir on top of it.
I worked on that mixed front end a little bit before, not long ago, so I can redirect you to where you need to go if you want to, Lars.
Yeah, throw it at me and I'll take a look and see if it makes sense to me.
Yeah, nice.
But nothing in particular. If you need anything for the site, feel free. I did update to shift it towards, so we have a news feed now. You can RSS and stuff.
Should we post this? Should we post these videos in the news feed? Because we haven't been, but I'm just thinking maybe we should.
We could.
We do it in
the playlist is available.
I get the playlist, but I mean just so that people know news happened, because this is kind of the like weekly update right now.
Yeah, I was wondering actually, rather than posting the videos, although I think it's useful to link to them somewhere, to instead do like a weekly or bi-weekly newsletter kind of thing, the same way that MLIR does.
We can do it.
It's basically something that they just kind of take notes on things that they're working on or have been released in the last week or two, or committed anyways. And then, you know, that's nicely summarizes basically everything that I care about when I'm keeping up with those releases. And the LVN does the same thing every week, although that's kind of more community oriented or community managed, not run by the project itself. But, you know, if we did something similar, it's a little bit more digestible. You don't have to watch like a half hour, 45 minute, or however long we end up talking video. You just, you know, read the bullet points of what matters.
Yeah, what would be the best way to collate that? Because I don't think I can just check the Git log and maybe understand everything that's going on.
Yeah, no, I don't
I'm
think
happy
that's
to like summarize if I know what it's about. So.
I mean, if you want, like ping me or ping all of us either on the stand up or, you know, like on a whenever it's convenient, like a Monday or Friday or something, and just be like, hey, what happened this week? We can summarize it real quick and to like the main things that matter, and then collate that and throw it up on like a blog post or something like that. But that would be fairly low maintenance on your part, and it's something that, you know, we can easily do in a few minutes between the 3 or 4 of us, whoever wants to be in on that.
Yeah, cool. I'll look into what could be a decent workflow for getting that done.
I know on for MLIR, you know, they have their own LVM project has a discourse, and on the MLIR topic, they have just a post that's pinned that's like the in progress newsletter for the coming week. And as soon as they kind of like close out the week, that just gets turned into like the actual post for that week. And then they start a new one that's sort of the empty one. And then as they're working on stuff throughout the week, people go in there and kind of dump stuff in.
I wonder
that's sort of like a wiki format kind of thing.
Yeah, we could either do a wiki because we all, yeah, if we did a wiki, we all have access to it, so that would work. Because I was something like it's Google Doc where we need to invite on each week. Then
I'm thinking we would do pull requests just straight into the site, but I can pitch an idea when I've looked at it.
Oh yeah, that's true. So for each our own thing, pull request onto the post for the week would also work. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I'll let you know how we do.
Cool.
Luke, I think you maybe gave part of your stand-up notes already. I don't know if you want to expand upon it.
Let's see. So the big one was I did a bunch of changes to the Lumen command line so that you can have multiple inputs now. The output, the parent directories of output dir and output are automatically created now, so you don't have to pre-create them. And those can potentially be different directories because like I output to a bin directory, but output dir is usually _build for me, and it's different than the defaults. A bunch of things I converted to integration tests. Yeah, so just more change the test Erlang. Found a bug in my implementation of map from hash map for heap fragments where I was taking the layout of just the hash map instead of like the entire map term, which includes the header. So that was wrong. So if you had anything where like maps didn't allocate correctly when you were running low in memory, that's why. Yeah, that's it. Other than that, I think I found some bugs. The main one that I found, and I already mentioned in the channel, is that the strictness of equality. So Erlang equals like double equals will convert between numeric types, and then you have to do equals :equals to do like 3-quals in Elixir or like 3-quals in JavaScript. And so like EIR MLIR has a strict attribute, but the lowering to MLIR loses that, and they both use just strict equality. So like it doesn't. I can't write the test right. I can't convert the test to integration test right now, but Paul already knows about it.
Yeah, that's already been fixed up on my branch right now because I had to refactor a bunch of stuff around that, not just that comparison operator, but operators in general.
Okay. Paul?
Yeah, so basically the time that I've been able to spend on, you know, catching up on where I was last week, I didn't have as much time as I would have liked, but the main thing is with the refactoring around the type system, like to actually let it be strict instead of trying to do everything sort of dynamically. Uncovered quite a few bugs. So I've been kind of just working through those, getting those fixed. In the process have cleaned up quite a few things and addressed like a handful of the bugs that were on the issue tracker. The main thing that will come out of that is, you know, once that's stabilized here, which I'm hoping to have done in the next couple of days, I think the compiler, the stuff that's been producing will be a lot more stable, a lot more correct than it was previously. And then I'll be picking up back where I left off with the garbage collection integration. So the key thing there is making it so that the generated code ties into the garbage collector correctly. So we're not just like running out of memory as soon as you do anything serious. So
I'll stop finding all my heap fragment bugs though.
I mean, yeah, it's been a good stress for the allocator, so that part is good. It's just obviously can't really write any useful programs if you're limited to the default stack size we've been creating. So the bulk of that involves some further type system changes in MLIR. So the work that I've been doing the last week or so actually ties into that. Will make it a lot easier to express what I needed to express in the type system in order to lower things in such a way that it ties into the garbage collector. It's a very, very complicated system of LLVM. So that part of it took me quite a while to sort out the right approach. But now that that's been pretty well mapped out, there's a very straightforward road to follow there. So not super concerned about that,
Paul,
running into any issues.
I was curious, like, how you've been doing this, because like the documentation for LLVM always seems so hard to find what I want to find. So like, what are you using as resources to figure this stuff out?
The source code.
Okay, so you just look at the source code and
Yeah.
like, okay, so you're probably doing what I'm doing for like for JetBrains stuff, where like you just look for a method name you think would be useful, or you're just scanning a class and be like, oh, that method looks useful, I should try it. Is that what you're doing?
I mean, the documentation around the GC stuff has like some pretty good starting points, but the main thing that is missing, of course, are reference projects, things that really demonstrate how to use some of those tools properly. So there's a mixture of the LLVM dev mailing list where there's been lots of little tidbits dropped over the years, but there's also been a few research projects done by academics studying, various different compiler theory stuff using LLVM. And a few of those projects use GC. So unfortunately, a lot of those projects are built against very old versions of LLVM, but the key thing was that there's enough meat there on that bone to be able to kind of map that forward in time to the newest version of the APIs and figure out how to use them properly. For example, there was like a compiler for Dart that used LLVM. That one had some interesting pieces in it that helped me out. Manticore, which is like a SML based, like a parallel SML based language / compiler. Also had LLVM GC integration at one point. It no longer does. It was like on a branch that somebody just did like a quick research project with. A few other places like that. Unfortunately, all the real like production GC integrations, like the one for Azul, the Java GC, or the LLVM backend for the Java VM, is entirely closed source. But they did give a talk on it at one point where they shared, a variety of different, I don't know if I'd call them hints or something, but just, in the process of sharing the experience they had with it, there was some valuable information there. So it's been a lot of trying to dig up those things versus just sitting on the code base and trying to like guess how things are supposed to work. But, when those answers are missing, you just basically go read through the passes that operate on those pieces of the IR, because all the asserts basically tell you how, like what's expected, how to use things properly. And that's been enough to close the gap between those two things. But the GC stuff also depends on another feature of LLVM called stack maps, which in and of itself is like parts of it are super well documented, but then actually using it in a real project is basically just you're on your own. So that was another thing that I had to sort out. But both of those things now I've got a firm grasp on for how Lumen will use them. So the last remaining piece of that I haven't implemented yet is tagging the values, the term types with a custom address space when lowered into LVMIR. That allows us to flag those values on the stack as GC roots. And then the garbage collector gets essentially that set of roots to operate on via the stack map.
So the address space just shows up in the stack map. It's not literal like bit tagging, or is it?
Right. No, it's transparent in the final generated code. It's something that only exists in LVMIR.
Yeah,
it doesn't actually use like tag bits or anything like that.
That approach of looking at how the passes work reminds me of like how I had to figure out how fine usage works. Was I just put the debugger in fine usage and be like, oh, you are looking for this, therefore I must give you this.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you just have to try stuff out and see what happens. I have a whole repo full of what I call LVM experiments, where I've just handwritten LVMIR to see what happens when you compile it with various things. And that's essentially my sandbox for testing things when I'm run out of documentation to read.
Are you aware there's an LVM conference at the beginning of October?
An LVM conference? Yeah, I think it's a virtual one this year.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know if you didn't know that it was happening.
And in the past, I never considered actually going, but this year, honestly, I was debating at least checking it out. I haven't looked to see what the cost is or if it's like open to everybody or what this year.
It's free or $50 if you want to support them.
Cool. Yeah, I'll probably do that then. It's worth it to pay close attention. These days, I'm staying pretty close to what's on master, just so that it's very easy for me to upgrade us as they release things that we need, versus waiting long periods of time and then having to deal with merging things in. So that I actually need to publish another LVM release now. But I think once Lumen stabilizes a bit, I'll slow that release cycle down, because we'll have a lot more, less need for us to change that frequently, only if we need to pick up new fixes for various things. So.
Oh, keeping up with master, that reminds me, since we're post-conference, we were going to post-conference catch up with Rust, remember? Because right now we're using your forks of like Bumpalo and not Hans's, because of the Rust version difference.
Yep. Yeah, no, I'm fine with that.
Before we do that, like globally, I'll have a look and make sure that Bumpalo and Hashbrown compile, that my folks compile on the latest Rust nightly, and then we can
that'd be good. Yeah, there's definitely a few things that I'd like to take advantage of as soon as we can upgrade. There's a bunch of things that I wrote proc macros for that can probably be done in const functions now, and there was something else and I just spaced it. Whatever, it doesn't matter. The other change I want to make to the build system, once I get the garbage collection stuff done, is switching some of the custom like release management stuff and scripting pieces that I put together and move those into like cargo make. So that would require one extra tool, like a plugin for cargo, to be installed. But the advantage is that it's a lot more portable, and it doesn't require us to maintain a make file and shell scripts and things like that. So,
if it's a cargo thing, it's more likely to work with all like the editor's Rust integration, isn't it? Too.
Probably. I haven't actually looked to see how good the editor integration is, like if they understand that cargo make exists, what happens if you do cargo build on a project with cargo make. When I was looking into it, I'm pretty sure you can define aliases for stuff, but I think there's some limits. So, you know, you still need to invoke it a particular way to get it to do the thing you want. But it would mean that instead of needing to, you know, maintain that shell script separately and like kind of hack around the fact that we have to use different cargo command line APIs to gather the information we need, we can just use cargo make and it'll be, you know, a simple command to do all the things that I'm currently doing there.
Oh, you mean where you like have to run the JSON to get the error right and then like run it?
Yeah, all that. It's basically, you know, a hack around the fact that I can't just call cargo build or whatever directly. I have to invoke Rust, the Rust-C task. But yeah, so those are the main things. I expect to have the type system stuff done this week and probably the garbage collection stuff by the end of next. We'll see how it goes this week, but that's the timeline I've got in mind. It was like a week, give or take, on that. So,
all right, let's call it here. I'll sorry, I was just looking at the chat box. I didn't see that. I'll post the Hangout link if anybody wants it. I'll just create a DM between the 5 of us so that
cool.
Everyone in the channel doesn't join in Slack. All right, thank you.
Talk to you later.